All right. Thank you guys for showing up. I honestly did not expect anybody to be here because I just found out a couple hours ago that I was going to be on the road tomorrow night. So I really appreciate you guys being so flexible. The two big things that I wanted to do today is look at houses and go over the quiz. And then just touch on whatever else you guys needed to. I think that those are going to be the biggest things. Because it looks like to me and I wanted to talk a little bit about grading as well. It looks like most people are pretty much staying on top of things. Over the weekend, I got several emails from people who were saying that it was impossible to post a comment on somebody else's submission for the discussion. Did either of you guys have that problem?
I have not tried to reply to anybody yet. I was going to do that tomorrow. So I just posted my initials, so I'm not sure.
Okay. Yeah, I'm in the same boat as Christina.
Okay. When I went online to try to figure out what the problem was, I did not have any access to Canvas at all. And the error message was, it sounded like, catastrophic end of the world apocalypse type stuff. And so for the next hour, I was looking out of my windows for, one of those hunters from T2. But it was just really weird because there was absolutely no interface at all. And then this morning when I went back on and I was trying to talk to tech support, everything was totally fine. So I think it was just a glitch. What I was told is that for some people in some areas, Canvas does have, there are outages over the weekend just because they do updates and things like that, which I think is kind of funny because a lot of classes have stuff due over the weekend, so you have time to work on it, but that's fine. So if you did have a problem, first thing is try it again. And if you still have a problem, talk to your Canvas tech support people and see what's going on. A lot of the times, since Canvas is an umbrella program and each university has their own menu of items, functionality, it may be an issue where we'll have to talk to UVU directly. But hi, Jocelyn. Thanks for making it. I know it's spur of the moment, but I do appreciate it. So I did want to mention something about grading. I'm trying to make sure that within a week everything is graded, and usually the lower, I forget what's the word. The lower stress items are graded first, and the higher stress items, there's a couple more days of lag. And if you do see a 0 when I do it, it just means that that's the day I'm grading. And if you haven't gotten it done, let me know what's going on or turn it in or whatever. Especially in this first month and a half, as we're trying to figure out what the rest of the semester is going to look like. If you do get a 0 on something, most of the time there'll be a note that just says, please submit for points, and then just turn it in when you're able to. And I have had people get seriously freaked out before, but the 0 is there because that triggers Canvas letting you know that you forgot to turn in an assignment. When COVID hit, one young man in the class had to take care of his 2 older parents who had been pretty sick. So he was doing the work, but he wasn't turning anything in. And a week before finals, his grade was at like a D-, D+, something like terrible. He turned around and just started turning in everything that he was supposed to and commenting on the discussions like he was supposed to and turning in all his work logs and actually recording his attendance. And by the last day of finals, he had got his grade up to an A-. So turning in stuff is really important. If you are having a hard time doing that, just remember that every week in the look at the attendance module, make sure that you, even if you've attended, turn in the 5 things that you learned. If you haven't attended, watch the video and then turn that in just as soon as you can. And that will always help, because it does answer questions that people have been emailing me, and then also questions from people who attend live. So I hope nobody here freaks out because they see a 0. And again, I want to remind people that I have never refused an extension on anything when somebody has bothered to let me know. My compassion fizzles out quite a bit when 2 months after the end of the semester, somebody calls angry that I gave them a grade different than what they wanted. I think if it's really important to somebody, they will communicate before it's way too late. I don't know, maybe not. All right, so that was one big thing. And then I'm glad you 3 are here, because what I want to do is go over the discussion for the houses that have been turned in. And I want to look at them and get feedback from you guys, see what you think. All right. And I'll talk about them a little bit, and then we can talk about them too. For this discussion, your responses are supposed to be 3 responses following the guidelines given. And it's basically just an introductory exercise to familiarize yourself with just the process of critical thinking when it comes to art. We aren't embracing the full model. The next discussion that we have actually interactivity on will be an exchange where we address that model. And then at the end of the semester, when everybody looks at people's final projects, then you will be doing a 4-paragraph review where each paragraph is a sentence or 2 regarding the critical model that we're using. All right, so you guys, I want you to kind of ease into it. I also wanted to iterate that it is important, do your best to familiarize yourself with the tools of artistic critique, and see what else you can apply it to. But we will, in about a month and a half, I'm going to start pushing hard to have people submit their artistic critiques. And that's something, again, if you don't want to record your voice on camera, you can write it out and then have somebody else record it as you, and that's perfectly fine too. Okay. I'm just dinking around on my computer a little bit, scowling so everybody thinks I'm concentrating. I like that. I have several kids, and I like the kind of angry dad scowl that lets everybody know not to bother me because I'm concentrating. I'm thinking really hard. I love doing that because the kids know that I'm not really upset, but they do realize that it's part of the game where they need to leave me alone, which is a great game to play. Let's see. Okay, I'm looking up something else really quick here right before we get to this. And then, all right, okay. I'm going to share my do the magical screen share. All right. Now on this, when I do these, when we look at these things, if you do happen to notice the person's name, forget it, because as with everything, once you turn it in, you also have the right to go back and resubmit. So if there's anything in here that we look at, or the artist who did it isn't happy with it, they can always resubmit. The discussion, I would say leave the discussion alone, because the discussion you're evaluated on the parameters of the discussion, not the quality of the art that's being presented. And it's when you submit the art itself, that's when you pay attention to whatever critique that I give. Right, so here's the first one that we're looking at. Now you submit 5 images of different perspectives. And I want to point out that there's 3 where we do have close-ups, and there's 2 that are a little bit farther away. But what I like about this is that each of the 3 close-ups feels very different. And that's, the parameters of the assignment is to do 5 very different, emotionally different, perspectively different images of the house that you built. But aside from that, looking at the structure itself, I really like how the structure is built. The reason I like it is because it's evident that the person took the time and energy to take it seriously. You tell that this person is an art student because they're trying. And I really appreciate that as a teacher. I think I told you that the worst thing I've seen is somebody took a piece of paper and folded it so it became basically a base and then 2 walls, and drew on it with a marker, and that was their house. And it sucked. What is nice is that this one does not suck, and I really appreciate that. So that's the 3 different, the small ones you have right here where you're looking down, you have a squirrel. It's in nature. And the other small one, you have it in an alcove window area to give it scale. I really like that. I like how the setting for most of these kind of mimics the idea that this is a cabin of some sort, especially this one and this one. And I just really enjoy the different perspectives. Then we go down and look at what they did for the responses. What I appreciate is that this person labeled, the person that they were critiquing, and then they did A, B, and C, just like in the examples. And I really, it makes it a lot easier for me, but I appreciate that also because it's evident that whoever turned it in was really paying attention to the parameters of the assignment. And I think all of us, excuse me, have been, and sometimes for me, it's been several times in a semester where I just want to get the assignment in and I'm not paying attention, I'm not reading the whole thing. And I appreciate the fact that this individual did read everything. So I'm not just critiquing the house and the comments, but also critiquing the submission itself, which I really appreciate. Now I look at this, I haven't seen some of these before. And what is really fascinating to me is how different people have made these. And what I really like about this is that this house is unique. I mean, it looks like a rumbled, tumble down structure. And even though we have a very similar distance from the home, each one is a very different view, and each one is a very different set of lighting. And I really appreciate that too. Like this one, daylight, but you can hardly see what's going on. I think that's worthwhile. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. You guys are supposed to say something, and I didn't invite any comment. So anybody want to comment on this house? And when I'm doing a screen share, I can't see your hand raised up. So whoever wants to, go ahead and unmute yourself.
I like the way the surroundings give an idea of the scale of the house.
Yeah, very much. I like this one where you see, that orange peel texture on the wall, and this one where you have like a squirrel modeling for size. But yeah, very much. Each setting, you really feel the scale of the house, and it's playful. All right, excellent. I'm sorry, my computer was doing something weird and I'm taking care of it now. Okay, anybody want to comment on this one?
I like the varying textures that they did, like the wood knots on the door versus the stone on the walls. And then the other pieces that are just falling off. It's very different.
Yeah, I really I enjoy that when it looks like somebody's having kind of fun interpreting what they're building. So yeah, I love the different kinds of textures. And it looks like most of it is visual drawn, but the way, the different kinds of paper and stuff like that uh, give a little bit more to it than just drawing all the texture. So yeah, I like that. Now this one, look at the different. Okay, this is almost identical to this in position, but it's a completely different background and a totally different. Looks like a different set of filters for lighting. I mean, because here it's warm, here it's kind of cold. I think that's always kind of interesting to me too. These two have almost identical setups. Camera's a little bit higher on this one, but again, you have completely different backgrounds. And I see, this makes me think of Slinkachu a little bit. So I like that. The house, to me, I like how the house is constructed. There's a bit of texture, but it looks sturdy. I like how the frames of the windows kind of pop out a little bit, and this is a very different texture for the roof. Anybody want to comment on this house? Like Jocelyn?
So sorry, I am driving right now, but I'm literally pulling up to where I'm going. So
Oh, okay. No,
I was just looking
that's no
fine in
problem.
a sec.
All right, I'll get if you don't mind commenting on something later on, that'd be perfectly fine. Okay, yeah, we don't want you getting in a wreck. Do Christina or Whitney, do you guys want to comment on this one?
I like the depth of the windows and that with the lighting you get shadow, so it adds even more depth. Obviously with the flatter lighting you don't get that, but I do like the depth that adds.
Yeah,
I agree with Whitney. I like what she's done with, I said she, I don't know who made it. I like what they've done with the shingles on the roof for the same reason. It casts some shadow and gives it a lot of texture and depth.
yeah, that kind of thing is fun to me. Yes, very nice. Okay, it looks to me that this person. Oh, I was going to say we're missing a photo, but we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we have all 5 photos. And looking at this, this is really fun. This reminds me quite a bit of that one, the Paper Homes website I suggest you go look at. It looks like they kind of borrowed some from that. Like the windows in the other one, you have these pillars here that stand out just a little bit and give it some depth. One thing I really like about this is you have a very strong tactile texture here, and then it kind of goes up to a drawn texture here, more visual texture. And I kind of like that. That's interesting to me because it just does things with your eyes focus, and it engages you a little bit more in the image itself. I kind of like that. And I like how you can see the sides of the tiles right up here. The window is drawn on here, and these are drawn, but then they're drawn on paper that's stuck on, so you have a little bit of depth to it. I think that's really kind of fun. And the shape is unusual. I really like the shape. On this this whole picture right here. It's kind of fun to have this on the back of the couch with the toys around it, and then having it with an angry cat. And I like how these three are poised almost the same, except this one, well, each of them feel very different because they're in completely different settings. And that's fun for me because you see a little bit more engagement. All right, any of you guys want to comment on this one?
I like that the architecture is a little unusual, the design of the house.
Well, that's fascinating because with this kind of, especially with this kind of a thing, we're clued into expecting a certain kind of grandma house. I say grandma house because I live in St. George. There's a lot of little houses like this that are the homes for everybody's favorite grandma. And I love the fact that that's what you're kind of expecting, but then you have this conservatory stuck on the edge side there that makes it suddenly a bit more fun. Yeah, I really like that. So yeah, excellent. Okay, the first thing I notice about this is the level of detail. Look at that. I really like that. I think it makes it a lot of fun. Like all the shingles are cut, and it's they've kind of the shingles make it feel a little bit floppy, and they've kind of gone with that. Everything feels just a little bit floppy, but it's completely consistent throughout. And there's these little touches like the doorknob and the porch light, and then the planter and the pot there. That just makes it fun. So I really like the house construction in this one. The second thing that I noticed is that all five of these, the house is in the exact same position, but there's absolutely no confusion that these are each completely unique. And I love that. Each one has a different set of lighting, totally different setup on this one, where it looks like it's in between like houseboats. And it just, which I think makes for kind of an ironic conversation. I love this kind of a picture where you have one house that's on the stoop of another house. Yeah, these are great. And I love the title of the book right there next to it. All right, any of you guys want to comment on this one?
I really like the little details, the doorknob, the porch light, and the flower box. All just really make it cute and show the attention and care that went into creating it.
Yeah,
I also really like, oh, sorry.
no, go for it.
I also really like that they had the window go all the way through the house. So it lets in, and there was one you could see all the way through to the other side of the scene, which I thought was really interesting. Like you can see the door through the window.
Right. And then this one, you see the dock. The plants, and then the yard, and you can see inside the house too. Yeah, stuff like that just makes it more fun, I think. What did you get when you guys saw Slinkachu's work for the first time? What did you think about it? What was your first response?
I thought that the detailed little scenes, the people looked like real people. It was all just so detailed but miniaturized, and it was just a lot of fun and entertaining to view.
Well, and I really love his whole attitude. Um, the underlying playful irony. There's a lot of artists that are driven by anger, and all of us in our careers, we've dealt with that, and that's part of the process of being an artist. But if anger is your motivation for creating, it cannot remain sustainable. It's not compatible with long-term sustainable creativity. And what I love about what Slinkachu does is he will do several things that a lot of people want to talk about because they're angry, but he's inviting you to look at the absurdity of it. And I just think it's wonderful. It's I don't know if any of you guys have so few social skills that you've ever watched Monty Python. I mean, that's to tell you something about me and how I fit in with society. That was what I watched growing up all the time. But John Cleese, he said that he and Eric Idle and the whole crew, Gillum, were all sitting together one day, and they realized they didn't need to do it anymore. He said there was no more anger there, which I thought was really kind of an interesting observation, because if you look at it now and look back and look at it with a perspective of what was going on politically, there's a lot of anger there. But it's gone out to such a wide audience that people just embrace the absurdity. And so they could go back after years of being away from it and not having to be angry anymore. They could all go back and revisit the things, and make absurd movies and musicals even, and all that kind of stuff. And I just think that's really interesting. But I was thinking about that because that's I love that kind of perspective of playful absurdity. There is something to be said about giving a voice to the voiceless who are upset and angry, but that narrows your audience quite a bit. And somebody like Sinkachu is able to get that and help people through their frustration by showing them just the absurdities of what made them angry in the first place. And that's kind of what this house makes me think about. Just because it is playful, it's fun, but they also took it very seriously. And I like that perspective. All right, this one does not suck. Are any of you guys fans of like spaghetti westerns, stuff like that, the low budget western? This is what this makes me think of. Just the low budget spaghetti western when the guy was told to build a church for the lot and he was given $25. And I love that because this person did take the time to take this serious. But it has also that kind of playfulness to it as well. And whoever made this, I think they did a really, really nice job. I love the textures, and if you look at it, you can tell the textures are made with materials that you don't expect. Like this looks like it's cardboard with finger paint glue on it, and then the vertical siding looks like it's masking tape. And I love the fact that this person was being, having fun making this, but they took the assignment seriously too. Because you look at each of these, they've done different things like distorting the shape of the object, doing interesting things. This is a kind of shot that would not surprise me seeing in a movie today, where you have that, where you can tell what it is only because of the angled shadow. This kind of, and then this, I love this kind of irony, the playful irony. So what are your guys' perspective on this one?
I agree with your comments. I like the variety in the photographs on this one. The one where it's shot from down low and it makes the scale of the little church look like it matches the scale of the houses in the background is a lot of fun.
This one here.
Just just a lot of creativity used in the photographing the piece.
Yeah. It's really engaging, I think, and enjoyable, which is nice. Yeah, I like that. Well, this reminds me of one of my favorite movies of all time. And I think that this is my favorite image. You guys familiar with John Wayne, Maureen O'Hara, The Quiet Man?
The Quiet Man. Yeah, I made this one. It's an Irish cottage. So yeah.
That just makes me really happy. Yeah, this is really fun. These are very similar, but again, you have a very different take on it. I mean, this is like right on the edge where you have the bush right behind it. And this is out in the middle of a lawn, where you see all the stuff behind it. Then this one and this one looks like they could almost be the same, except they're taken at very different times and from very different perspectives. And I like this. That's nice. What did you use for the thatching on the roof?
It's a raffia that I got at the
Raffia,
craft
yeah.
store. I got it, at the Hobby Lobby. The scale is a little too big for it to actually look like thatch as much as I wanted, but I couldn't find something that was a finer width. But yeah, it's kind of like that.
Yeah,
It's almost like
this
a
turned out
dried
really fun.
grass texture.
Where did the bridge come from?
It's my daughter's. She had it with her. It's a fairy bridge that she had with her dollhouse. So I borrowed it for photographing.
Excellent. But it's fun because you know that this is play, and you know that this is play, but it's fun to have this give scale to this. I like that. That's a lot of fun.
Thank you.
And I really enjoy this perspective with the light coming on from the inside.
Thank you.
All right. Jocelyn or Whitney, do you guys want to talk about this one?
I really like the time and effort you put into it. It's really well crafted. And I also like the different lighting that you did. One's kind of like at dusk, you can just barely see the light inside. And then the one at the very end where it is dark outside and you can completely see the warm light shining through.
Thank
Like
you.
this one? Yeah, that's a lot of fun. I'm impressed. I've had classes before where almost all the houses you're just what a waste of time. And I'm not getting that from. I like this Kidzilla. That's awesome. And I like how this is very different perspectives, where you have the little addition of the plant to give scale, but this one is right close up, and this is a little bit further away to show you the size of the building. And I love the fact that this has, this veranda. That's just fun. What do you guys think about this one?
I think this one also has a lot of creativity in the photography. I like the hand reaching for it and the kid to give scale to the house. And
Yeah.
I also like the balcony and the colors they used. It's just a playful and fun, just bright colors that are engaging.
Yeah, and I love the balcony and the way that it was put together. Give kind of this little bit of shadow on it. And I think that that's kind of fun too. This is kind of I like this where the person made the texture of the roof using a marker. That's kind of a fun type of thing. I like the bright colors. It looks to me though that the person only had two different settings. No, it looks like three because this one is the same as the first. And then these two are on one side of the fence. And it looks like this is on the other side of the fence. So I think this is really kind of an interesting one because I think that the person I would like to see more from the series because this first picture and this last picture is almost identical. And these two pictures are almost identical. Something like this, if it's going to be in front of a fence, I would recommend that you move it quite a bit more when you do multiple shots. Like this one is on the opposite side of the fence, and that would be okay. But these two are really, really close to each other. So any observations about this one?
The bright colors and the shape of the bay window on this one remind me of the townhomes that are lined up in San Francisco with bright, fun colors.
Oh yeah, very much so. Kind of the bright colors when you see those pictures of like a Greek village or something, the really, really bright colors. But yeah, it makes me think of that too, now that you say that. Oh no, it fell over. I like that this one has a kid in it too. This is kind of a fun one, having these kinds of windows. Are these transparent at all, or are they printed like that?
So it's like the clear cellophane packaging, and then I got markers and drew on it so that it is transparent. So that one that's tipped over is so you can see the light shining onto the ground.
Oh yeah, yeah. Okay. Nice. That's really fun. And I like the variety of perspectives too. Not perspectives necessarily, but settings. Yeah, that makes it fun. I love the Kidzilla. All right. Any comments on this one?
I love the stained glass windows. I think that was so creative and so beautifully done, and it just really adds a lot of fun to that. And I wouldn't have thought of that. I think it's so clever and really beautiful.
Yeah, that is an awful lot of fun.
Thank you.
Okay, this is one that we did look at, I think, last time. And I like having a couple more images to see. One thing I like about this is that this person built this without access to the kit. And they did something a little bit like what Whitney was thinking of, where they were using clear plastic as part of the construction. Like with this, replacing a whole wall with it. But I think Whitney using the plastic as stained glass, yeah, very cool. This one I think is kind of fun too, because we have the clear plastic in between the cardboard, and it gives it a very different feel than most, I mean, all the other houses that we've looked at, all the other buildings. And I like the little sign there. And there's plants on the inside a little bit, which makes it fun. This dog looks like it would rather do almost anything else. All right. What do you guys think?
I like that it's a greenhouse. That was just a creative idea
Yeah,
rather than a home.
I think that's kind of fun. How about you, Jocelyn?
Yeah, I really like this one. I like that they used like saran wrap or cellophane or something to give the effect of glass. Um, and I like the settings that they had with the pineapple and the dog. I think that was fun.
Yeah. Very, and I like that when you look at these, the ones that I think are the most successful, the common elements are people are being creative with the houses, and their perspectives on settings are just all over the place. I think that's fun to see that. And I think that, as with most things, or as with a lot of things, if you do it a couple times, um, you feel like that it's not going to go very far. But when you start doing it a lot, then it expands it opens up doors to a lot of other possibilities. I took a group of students to Las Vegas, and we looked at the Bellagio ceiling that Chihuly did. Or actually, he trained several people to make those pieces that put in the ceiling. And I asked the students to look at it, and there's probably about 1,200 pieces in that ceiling. And if you just put like one piece of glass in the middle, who would have cared? Big deal. Put 20 in the middle. Okay, that's starting to get a little bit interesting. But packing it with so many that it makes its own texture because they're overlapping, and it's hard to tell what the individual pieces are unless you really intentionally focus on one thing. It completely transforms what's going on. And when coming up with ideas, sometimes it's really, really hard. Like when we started talking about textures, it's really hard to come up with a couple textures. But then as everybody comes up with a couple textures, suddenly a dam breaks, and then it becomes super easy. I've done this exercise I'm talking about is in a couple of modules where we talk about visual and tactile textures, where we have to list, as part of the quiz, you have to list 12 of them. The first 3 are always miserable because everybody's quiet. And it's like being in church and nobody wants to admit they're the one who farted, kind of that quiet. And after you get to about the 4th or 5th one, you can't stop because everybody all of a sudden can think of another texture. And then people can think of 3 or 4, and then people can think of several. And so when you're starting with ideas, the point of that little diatribe from me is that when you think of ideas, write them down, scribble them out, do something to get them out. I can't remember. He was a contemporary of Bob Proctor. And he said that ideas are like silvery fish that must be stabbed with a pen or they slip away. Get the ideas out. And after you get about 3 or 4 ideas, the first 3 or 4 are really hard, but after that, it gets a lot easier. And then you can start with the actual idea production. after you get those first 3 or 4 done and out. Anyway, lesson for life. All right, now I want to go over the quiz. We did see that a couple people turned in their houses on the discussion board have already made comments on other people. Now that a lot more people have done that, please, if you go back and start making comments. I'm kind of holding off grading the discussion because if you haven't done one, if you've made the comments and haven't done the houses, or you've done the houses and you haven't made the comments, you get half points. And Canvas doesn't always let me know when you add to the discussion. So if you are one of the people who did one or the other and haven't had a chance yet to do the other, and you get half points, and you see that it hasn't changed when you've done the second half for that assignment. Remember, the 2 halves are post your photos and then make 3 comments on 3 other students. Just email me when you do the missing part, and I'll take care of it. Okay, because Canvas doesn't always let me know, which I'm sure that they probably do, but it'd be nice to have like a bell go off or something. Anyway, okay, we are going to look at the quiz now. So this is for chapters 3 and 6. How many of you now have access to the textbook, either online or in person? And how many of you have already read these chapters, or at least glanced through them?
I have the textbook, but I have not looked at the chapters for this module yet.
Okay. All right, good. Because when we go through this, keep your eyes open for this stuff as you read through the book. Okay. And this is dividing volumetric form with line. And last week we talked a little bit about making shapes that look like 3-dimensional scribbles, because you're using the line of the wire to create something of a volume, a 3-dimensional shape. Now, which type of line is the most calm and peaceful of these 3? Which line of these 3, which line is most at rest?
I would say horizontal.
Yes, Jocelyn, Christina, absolutely, horizontal. Very good. And when you draw or paint water, one of the difficulties is remembering that the water always wants to seek its own level. It always wants to be horizontal. And you can see this a lot in kids' paintings. They'll paint the direction of the flow of the water rather than the surface. And so it's kind of an interesting thing to see. All right, let's talk about unifying principles of design. That's in the chapter. I don't really want to go into it too much, what those design principles are, because this question is not asking you to tell me what the design principles are, but how important are they to, for example, defining art? Are they absolute hard and fast rules for artists?
No.
Can any of you argue yes? I think it's going to, I agree with Christina. I think it's really hard to argue that a yes on these, unless the artist is trying very hard to make a specific point. And there are artists, several of them, that will set parameters, a list of rules that they must follow, and then they will follow those. There's a guy named Corey Archangel who did a lot of work when the electronic space was kind of opening up during the mid-90s and late 90s. And the work that he did was specifically designed to engage people, asking, how can these media be used to generate art? He would do things like, he would take game console cartridges and reprogram them with movies. Like one of his movies is about a 5-minute movie about Super Mario getting Alzheimer's. And when corporate empires realized that you could easily do automatic responses on emails that said, hey, I'm going to be out of the office until Tuesday, I'll get back to you then. What Corey Archangel set up is a display where he had on either side of a table 2 computers facing each other, and then on the screens behind them was showing their email conversations back and forth. And he would do a delay so that 5 minutes after one received an email, it would send an email saying, hey, I'm sorry, I'm out of the office. I'll get back to you when I'm back in. And then the other computer would say the same thing back. And I thought it was pretty ingenious. But one of the things I really liked about him is he defied these unifying principles and made you think about why they're there in engaging this new kind of space for generating art. One of my favorite series that he did was after Industrial Light and Magic developed, the first graphic painting program. Corey Archangel, when it went on the open market, got it, and he just used the standardized brush tools, but he printed it on these 2-foot by 2-foot glossy white canvases. Because he's Corey Archangel, he took it to a gallery and they said, sure, we'll put him up. And he sold them for thousands of dollars. And it was just the brush tools out of the standard kit. So I think that the unifying principles of design give us a set of vocabulary to help us not only think about how we want to present our intent as we create, but also to give us a set of vocabulary sets so we can describe and talk about what we see when we experience art. And I think that's probably the most important reason for the unifying principles of design. But that's my perspective. And if anybody in the class has a different one, make a case for it. I think it'd be awesome. And by briefly explain, we're talking about 1 to 2 sentences. So I think that's okay. From the book, what is the simplest definition of a line? Have any of you 3 read the chapter? These 3, okay. I will not give you the answer here. This is from the book, and it is not the answer that comes to your mind right now. Okay, so keep that in mind. And I like doing that because it tells me who has read the chapters. Now here's a good one. I want to hear from a couple of you about this. Do you believe that we have a propensity to create order out of chaos? And why? What's your evidence?
Yes, because we fold our laundry instead of stuffing it into our drawers unfolded.
Okay, you do. No, I do fold my socks. I used to color code them. I don't do that anymore. But Jocelyn and Whitney, would you guys agree with that?
I think I would agree.
Why do you think we do that?
At least visually, like I just immediately think of like the Gestalt principles. Like even if things are chaotic, we like automatically like group things together and kind of like order it in our mind.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think that it may go back to just the fact that our ancestors who didn't do that all were killed. It's humanity has been on the planet for a remarkably long time. And the people that made it, our ancestors, are the ones who were able to get along together and connect with each other and help each other to survive. And what's interesting to me is my dad grew up as a hillbilly in Montana. And he did this exercise with me that his dad did with him. But during the summers, you could get like a nickel a jackrabbit in some areas because the rabbits, just like in Australia, were devastating to the crops. And so kids, 8, 10 years old would have little BB guns and rifles and they'd go out and earn candy money by shooting jackrabbits. And when he first started doing this, he couldn't see any of them. And his dad said, well, there's 5 right there. And he said, well, what do you mean? So his dad said, okay, look at the grass. Look at how the grass is growing. It is almost all straight up and down. Now look at all the places that don't fit that pattern. And he said that it took him a minute, and then all of a sudden he could see the 5 jackrabbits that his dad saw. And it's just because our brains are designed to establish patterns that we identify. And I think a big part of that was survivability. But that's what I believe. But I just finished a project for Wavetronics in Springville, where they needed a whole bunch of squares of glass with 20 different colors, but they needed it to look random. So the first thing we did was I generated a random set for this, and they did not like it. And so I spent some time drawing something that looked random, even though it wasn't. Because what happens with the randomness is that we think there's pattern. But then when we use that and try to make it look random, we find those patterns that we're identifying that were randomly there and break them up. So it looks random, even though it's not, which I just think is really interesting. But yeah, I agree with you guys completely on that. Okay, does anybody know what the numeric ratio of the golden section is? First, what is the golden section? Golden section is the first thing, and this is from Pew Charitable Trust, underwrote a series of surveys from about 1995 to about 2002, and correlated some information about golden section, golden ratio all around the world. And one of the things that they discovered was every culture on the planet responds favorably to the golden ratio. And a little while later, and I can't remember what school, it was one of the schools working with facial recognition, and they wanted to know how early in a childhood development we start doing our own facial recognition. And they found that babies respond to a mother's smile when it's in the golden ratio, which I think is fascinating. When it's not, they start crying. So that's baby with no life experience. That's one of the first things it starts recognizing. And I think that's fascinating to me for a couple of reasons. But one that's really baffling is you look at a lot of these really ancient art traditions around the world. They use the golden ratio in their patterning. And there's something oddly consistent and uniting about it, even though there's a good chance that these cultures never talk to each other. When I was working on that book for Safavid era architecture, one of the things I learned is that the tradition of Islamic patterning in Iran is like a millennia old. What's fascinating is that there is a particular pattern that they use based on a 5-fold iteration of the golden ratio called the tree of life. And that's cool, that's interesting, whatever, professor. When you look down the center of a DNA strand, the helix of a DNA, do you have any idea? Do you know what the geometry on that is? It's a 5-fold expression or iteration of the golden ratio. And the DNA strand has been called the tree of life because that essentially is what it is. And I think that's absolutely fascinating. But the golden ratio is, it's essentially 3 to 5, but numerically, Fibonacci talks about iterates this in his observations of natural branching and just spiraling in the natural world. But the ratio is 1 to 1.618, or 1 to 0.618. And that's also in your reading as well. But I think it's fascinating. I don't think art qualifies as art, whether or not it follows the numeric ratio of the golden section. But what is really interesting is once you learn what that ratio is, you see it everywhere. Standard page size that we have is based on folding over 8 times the standard decal screen that a medieval European papermaker would be able to hold with their arms outstretched, working 6 to 8, 10 hours a day. It just so happened that when you divide that up into 8, it makes 8.5 by 11. And it just so happens that that is a pretty close approximation to the golden ratio. The way that type is set out on a page, the way that the faces you respond to positively are formed, it's all, I don't think that it has to fit the golden ratio, but it's interesting that that is a label consistent with most things that we respond positively to. I just think that that's fascinating. And it even goes to Kepler's laws of gravitational orbit, to how things erode and chemicals interact with each other. It's all based on the golden ratio, particularly in this case, as it relates to the placement of electrons in atoms. And because that's all based on the golden ratio as well, which who knows what that means? I don't know. All right, now on this, which type of line has more energy? Horizontal, vertical, or diagonal?
Diagonal.
Why would you say that?
It has the most, it's just the most dynamic line out of all of them. Horizontal is more resting, vertical is like a little more engaging, but diagonal is like the most dynamic and energetic because it moves your eye more throughout the piece. Your eyes aren't like resting.
Absolutely. It's like you caught it in the process of falling. So yeah, very definitely. Okay, now the 7 unifying principles of design pointed out in the text, these are in the text, and there's a section of about 9 to 12 pages where they go through and show examples of artwork following each of these unifying principles of design. So it is in the textbook. And I can give you page numbers too, but then you wouldn't learn nothing. So keep your eyeballs peeled for that. Now there's at least 3 different ways of creating an implied line, and you guys have all done numerous of these. The first one, and I'm going to say one, and then I want to see if you guys can come up with other ones. There's one right behind Jocelyn, and the one that I'm thinking of first is right behind Whitney. You look at Whitney, where the ceiling comes to the 2 walls and where the edge of her window frame is. Is there actually a line drawn in that room behind her where those corners come together? But when the 2 planes intersect, because our eyes sees light reflecting at different angles off of it, it reads that as a line, even though the line wasn't explicitly put there. So that's one kind of implied line. Another one is in the horizontal blinds right behind Jocelyn. We don't see that those lines are connecting with each other. They're not necessarily connecting with each other, but our eye automatically reads and follows each of those blind veins all the way across behind them because our brain wants to believe that it's a line. So an implied line is sometimes something that doesn't exist when 2 planes come together, either planes of color or planes of light refraction. And it can also happen when there is a line that starts and stops that our brain just fills in an understanding of the gaps. What's another really good one? Christina, could you point at something in front of you?
Yeah, I was just gonna say pointing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Perfect. Yeah, because what do you do? Christina, just hold up your pointer finger just one more time. What do you do automatically? What can you not help but do? You want to see where that goes, don't you? Thank you, Christina. Yeah, and you can't help it. eye lines, point lines, anything like that, it creates an implied line because the line is not there physically, but our brain reads it as being there. Isn't that interesting? Our brains work in really odd ways sometimes, but I think that even though sometimes it doesn't make a lot of sense, the fact that for thousands of generations, the reason why we survived is because our brains work that way, there's got to be something to it. Whether or not we agree with it is a completely different matter. Okay, let's talk about this word intent for a work of art. What is intent? What are some of the words that we can fill in for intent?
Purpose?
Purpose. Yes, excellent. What else?
I would say what the artist is trying to convey.
Okay, excellent. The message. All right, great. Jocelyn, it's all up to you.
I was thinking purpose also, but
Oh,
it's
whatever.
like the meaning.
Yeah, meaning. Okay, those are all good. The message, meaning, purpose. It's the reason that the artist is doing what they're doing. That's the intent of the work of art. If you're like John Cleese and you had something that you wanted to get out, one thing that I really love, have any of you met Brian Kershiznik or seen his paintings? He and I became friends because we met each other for the first time at a BYU thing, and both of us said the other's name right on the first try. And that was like completely unusual for both of us. And then a couple of years ago, we were both doing family research, and he found out that his family comes from the same part of the world that my family does. And we come from an area that's within like 75 miles from each other. That's where our two home villages are, which I thought that was kind of fun. But anyways, when he was asked, why do you do what you do? He said, there is something inside of me that builds up pressure until it finally ruptures. And that rupturing is what I'm painting. And I thought that's a really interesting way of thinking about that. Do you guys have something similar when you create something? You know, there's exercises that you have to do. And that's part of the process of learning. But when you do your own thing beyond the exercises, what are the kinds of things that give your art a reason for existing? Why do you make it?
I feel like we are all makers. And I feel like if we're not making, we're not complete humans. I think it's so vitally important to our souls.
That's really interesting because that's what St. Augustine said. St. Augustine said that all of us, every human is made in the image of their creator. And as part of the process of that, we have to expand and we have to create. That's part of living. When we stop, we die, or parts of us die. But the very act of creating proves that we are the offspring of something that created us, which I think is really an interesting perspective. I like that. He calls the desire to create the thumbprint of God on the soul. So in general, that's why we have to build. And Albert Dürer said the very same thing, and it's a very similar thing in his essay, The Four Pillars of Art. He talks about that. One of the things that makes art is that expressed need to create. So why do you guys, like Whitney or Jocelyn, is there something that drives the art that you make yourself?
Mine's driven for like connecting with other people in our specific like circumstances or situations.
That's really interesting because some of the earliest languages, written languages, are derived from rebuses. And rebuses are pictures that are designed specifically to communicate with everybody and connect people. I think more than any other written kind of communication, rebus is designed to bring people together. And I think that that's really fascinating. And then as cultures become more centralized, and those can be condensed into letters or ideoglyphs. But I think that's really fascinating. And it wouldn't surprise me if Genevieve von Petzinger, when she talks about her 32 symbols used by across 20,000 years of cave art in Europe, it wouldn't surprise me if that was a common drive uniting those people too. How about you, Jocelyn? Why do you make?
I don't know. I think mostly it's just for me. Just as an outlet. It's just something I enjoy.
So do you find yourself kind of agreeing with what Brian said? That you have a pressure that ruptures out?
Yeah, maybe.
I think I really think that's an interesting way of looking at it, but most of the professional artists that I talk to that are happy, I'm talking about not people that feel beaten down. Like occasionally you do come across, like Picasso said shortly before he died, I've become nothing more than a clown capering to the whims of the masses. But you get something like Kandinsky or Judy Chicago. These kind of people, they create because they can't do anything. I mean, that's what they have to do. And I just think that's really interesting. Or Kara Walker, she does a lot of work that is hard to experience for a lot of people. But again, she's not fueled by anger. She's fueled by this need to communicate and to get it out, to express. And I think that's really fascinating. Yinka Shonobara is another one of my favorites. Does the same kind of thing. Now, this is something that's interesting to me. Do you feel it is possible to predictably evoke emotions through the use of differing line qualities? Is that something that all of you feel is possible? I think all of you that are artists, yeah, absolutely. It's completely possible. What kind of, I would like each of you to give an example of a line quality and the emotion tied to it. First example I'll give is Picasso, when he did his little scribble of Man of La Mancha. Do you guys remember that? Of Don Quixote on a skinny Don Quixote on the back of a really worn out horse, where the line was just a scribble and the whole thing felt incredibly tired. And somehow he was able to communicate that with just the line quality. What kind of line would you use, for example, if you were expressing anger?
Bold and maybe lots of angles, jagged.
Yeah. I mean, that's something that comes to mind right away, isn't it? It's kind of interesting. Can you, Jocelyn or Whitney, can either of you think of an example?
I mean, this is a very practical example, but when you italicize text, it says, pay attention to me. This is important.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. That's great. I like that because you're communicating something beyond just the presence of emotion. You're communicating a need to pay attention. I think that's a really good example. How about you, Jocelyn?
Um, oh, I don't know, maybe like squiggly lines, like a bold squiggly line is like very fun, very like lively and energetic.
Well, I think you're right, and it's interesting you guys are describing this, because if you go on to your any of your style programs, your writing programs, the fonts that you see, there's a huge array of fonts, and they each communicate something a little bit different. And there's a whole nest of fonts that are designed to communicate um, kind of hoity-toity corporate energy. There's a whole nest of fonts that are designed to communicate approachable corporate energy. And then there's one that you would use for a kids poster. There's others that you would use for like doing posters for a third grade classroom. And it's fascinating to me because each of them communicates something, and I like that, because even though it's slightly different than what the text talks about, I think that all of those are great examples of using the line quality itself to communicate something specific. And I think that that's really interesting. There's an artist that I really like, Victor Ekpuk, who he's from West Africa, and you guys know who Keith Haring is? What Victor Ekpuk does is he uses something similar to Keith Haring's style, but he uses it to express the oldest writing in existence in Africa, on the continent, and he uses it to generate background designs, and then layered designs, and then visual texture and physical texture. So he's using this almost cartoony line quality to depict a very specific set of symbols, but he does it in such a way so that you can tell if the thing that he's doing belongs in a church setting or in a park, or if he's making a political statement, or if he's inviting a family to be engaged with it. And it's really, which I think is really fascinating. On the surface of it, you think, okay, well, it's the same thing. It's this font that he's developed, but he uses it in such a way and tweaks it in such a way so that the line quality communicates volumes beyond just the design. I think that stuff like that is just amazing when people can do it. Well, when people can do it successfully. And then there's I can't remember the guy's name. I want to say he's from Argentina, but in the early 70s, what he did was large paintings that were designed specifically as graphic expressions of font elements. So he's not doing a font letter, but he's doing an element of a designed font for the printing industry. And so his stuff, I think, is really fascinating because it's very graphic, it's very strong, but it becomes almost conceptual because he's inviting you to engage with the idea of what communicates corporate responsibility in the font they use on the letterhead. Why is a serif font that's a little bit squashed? Why is it used in the Bible? Does it somehow communicate reverence, or is it reverence that communicates just because of our association when we see it in Bibles? I love examining ideas like that. But as you move forward and do your wire sculpture, think about that as well. When we look at that, I don't know if you guys remember that image of the teddy bear wire one. It had a lot of different kind of line qualities, or the fish one. Both of those have lots of different line qualities. And it's fascinating to me because each of those lines communicates something different. When you have a long, smooth, flowing line, it feels calm. When you have all these little short wires wrapped around each other with little sharp ends sticking out, it feels like something you don't really want to touch. And then, when you have squiggles that are wrapped around long pieces of wire that are folded in on themselves to give them strength, it feels very different than like for that shoe where the structure comes from almost a grid that was built up. Like it just, there's different things that you can do that helps you to communicate different things or to express the intent behind why you're doing something. And sometimes, to be completely honest with you, the intent behind a lot of your work for classes like this is just, I got to get the grade. But that's a valid intent too. I think so. All right, well, that's all that I needed to cover tonight. Do you guys have any additional questions or observations?
I just wanted to say that I appreciate that when you look through everybody's houses, you're very enthusiastic and have something positive to say, and you're looking for complimentary things to say, and it's nice.
Well, I will tell you, I've taught for over 20 years, and I over the 20 years I've seen some really awful stuff. So I am so pleased that you guys do not suck. I hope you take that as a compliment because it's intended to as one. Oh, I've had a couple of students turn in Lego things as works, and which would not hurt my feelings so bad if they used more than like the 17 blocks that their kid had left on the floor. Then it becomes offensive. But yeah, I appreciate the work that you guys do, and I appreciate the fact that all of you have real lives, all of you are professionals, and all of you are trying, and that makes me very happy. All right, folks. Well, if anybody has any questions do come up. Please feel free to email me, and we'll cover that next week. But again, thank you so much for changing your schedule. I had an emergency that came up, so that I won't be able to do this tomorrow night. And you guys really made this evening much less boring than it would have been otherwise. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
And we'll
Good night.
look forward to seeing you guys next week.